Welcome back, everyone, to Economic Preppers. I'm your host today, Jeff. And you can see my stuff over here as I point to my right shoulder. Get it right this time. There's my Twitter handle. I'll be posting a little bit more about the story on Twitter as well. But I wanted to talk to you today about the death of the dollar and why there's definitive proof that if you just tie things together to see that other countries are already going around the US dollar system. How are they doing this? And how do I know this? Let me share my screen and talk about it. But before I do, if you like this kind of content, please like, share, subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment down below. All that good stuff really helps out the channel. But let's get to it. Why are countries definitively leaving the dollar in their rearview mirror? Well, we have nothing further to look for that than the gold market, the gold and the oil. The US dollar is known as the Petro dollar, has been since 1971. What's changed now is that the Chinese banks have disappeared from the LBMA gold auctions. Those are the London Bullion Market Exchange or Market Association. So basically what's happened is that the Chinese banks have disappeared from the LBMA. Now, I'll come back to this story and all the highlights in here, but first I want to give a little bit of a timeline of how this has come to be in the last several years. First, back in 2021, Saudi Aramco, the largest oil facility or the oil holding company in Saudi Arabia, was planning to prioritize energy supply to China for the next 50 years. That's when they were saying the last 50 years for the U.S. has been their priority. Now the next 50 years is about the relationship with China. That was said 3 years ago in March of 2021. Fast forward to 2022, Saudi Arabia considers accepting yuan instead of dollars for Chinese oil sales. Okay, so now we're in 2022, about a year after that last story, and they want to get away from the dollar, and they'll take yuan instead for oil. They're considering it. Now we move to just a few months ago, in September of 2023. Chinese gold demand soars and economic worries on a weaker yuan. So there's demand on gold market that's happening in China. And this story, the Chinese Saudi RMB. Now I'll explain that a little bit. It's confusing. Like it's the renminbi, and I probably pronounced that very terribly. But the difference between the renminbi and the yuan, they're almost synonymous. That's why I have Investopedia up here. Chinese money comes by two names, the Chinese yuan and the people's renminbi. That's easier to say, yuan, than renminbi. But there we go. The distinction is subtle. While the renminbi is the official currency of China, the yuan is the official unit of account for that currency. So that's where we're at in that story. So we were right here, on this one, where China and the Saudi, I'm going to say yuan because I'm already butchering renminbi several times. The Chinese-Saudi yuan settlement will insulate the oil trade from U.S. sanctions. Basically, I'll scroll down a little bit here. This is November, and this is about talking about de-dollarization, which has been a hot topic throughout all of 2023. De-dollarizing even a portion of Saudi oil trade would help China secure reliable energy flow even in the event of a future crisis or under the stress of what Chinese leader Xi Jinping has characterized as extreme scenarios. China's leaders know that in its dollar reserves, like Russia's, can be frozen, and the holdings and transactions of Chinese firms frozen and blocked. That's going back to the SWIFT system and the sanctions that the U.S. can put on there. So it is with this objective in mind that Xi explicitly asked Saudi leaders to accept yuan or renminbis in settlement for oil. So that happened back in, I believe this is the November story. Yes, November 7th. Fast forward just a little bit more, a couple more weeks. China and Saudi Arabia signed a currency swap agreement. This is right before Thanksgiving on November 20th last year. China's gold market in November, the premium is elevated. Gold reserves rose even further. We'll talk about the premium in a moment when I get back to that main story. And then lastly, before I get to the main story, China's yuan rises to the fourth most used currency in global settlements. This is from December, 2 days before Christmas, just last year. So let's get back to that main story. Let's dive into it. I'll start at the top. There's several parts highlighted I wanted to talk about. Let's get the scroll working. Please get the scroll working. Okay, we're back at the top of the story now. So why have Chinese banks disappeared from the LBMA gold auctions? There have been unprecedented departure of all the Chinese banks from the LBMA gold price auctions. These departures have uncommonly going uncommented by the LBMA, the FCA, the mainstream media, the auction administrator, ICE benchmark administration, and by the Chinese banks themselves. The LBMA, we're not going to go into, it's the London Bullion Market Association. So it was launched in March of 20th of March, 2015. And there was a lot of fanfare. I'm scrolling down, pardon the scroll. When the China banks were all welcome in the next year between 2015 and 2016. So the intention and the interest has been very positive and creates a more diverse pool of participants, which includes Chinese banks. We look forward to having enhanced numbers of participants for day one for the LBMA gold price. Wasn't from day one, but within about a year or so, they had 4 member banks join. Now let me jump down here, and I'll get to that. They talk about all those 4 different banks joining. Now here's a tweet that came out. It was it's from October 4th. And it's from the Bullion Star. Why are the 3 big Chinese banks no longer participating in the LBMA gold price auctions? ICBC, the Bank of Communications, and now Bank of China. Did they get booted out by the LBMA, or did they scarper once that they realized the pricing is rigged? Scamper, I'm guessing. Inquiring minds would like to know. Inquiring is spelled wrong, so maybe there were a couple typos. So for China's markets, 4 China's largest banks, all of which were heavily involved in the Chinese gold market, were added to the LBMA in 2015 and 2016. It was a major shift in the gold benchmark price setting process and signaled that the Chinese banks had arrived on the global stage. Scrolling down, though, given the above, the writer thinks that you would agree that it's rather odd and suspicious that and then all of these Chinese banks have recently disappeared from the LBMA gold price again. They all disappeared. So he digs in a little bit further. At the current time, there's not even one Chinese bank left in the London gold auction. The last one was the Bank of China that not only left, but they requested that it be temporarily suspended from the LBMA price auctions. This is stated at the IBA website under the auction participant, where there's a mention that's subject to a temporary period of suspension as requested by Bank of China. Whoever in the history of the world requested self-suspension? No one. So it's interesting that they said, we want to be suspended. Please knock us out. So ICBC and Bank of Communications had completely disappeared. As recently in July of 2022, they were both listed on the auctions. And the quick word, just for completeness, the 4th bank, the Chinese Construction Bank, they left the LBMA in 2017 and apparently had never returned. So scrolling all the way down here. So crickets, right? When the Chinese banks joined the LBMA, there was a lot of fanfare, okay? Much fanfare and publicity as throughout the rest of the article that I skipped over for sake of time and for brevity. From the LBMA, there was a whole bunch, and the ICE benchmark and the mainstream media, there was all this fanfare. Now, when the Chinese banks have all departed, there's complete silence and crickets. What's going on? So I'm going to get to that to wrap things up. So the last thing on this article I'm going to point out, the Shanghai gold premium has diverged so much lately from the above the LBMA gold price. Opening that tweet again from the Bullion Star. Here's the chart. So in the larger view, you can see the divergence. It's like a 5 to 6% divergence in pricing of the price in China versus the price in London. So let me drop out of all this and explain what I believe is happening. So we have the BRICS nations. Okay, the BRICS nations I've talked about several times. I'll post another video up here in the corner. The BRICS nations now include Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is basically working with China on 2 avenues. One, paying or accepting payment, remittance for their oil in the form of yuan or renminbi, as I attempt to say it one last time. They're taking yuan for oil, but they don't want yuan. Saudi Arabia do not want to hold on to yuan. So what they've done is they asked China to establish their own gold price. So now what they're able to do is they're going to exchange the yuan directly for gold on the Shanghai exchange, because the Chinese banks are all leaving the dollar system, which is founded through the LBMA and also for COMEX as well. But for the most part, the US dollar system and gold is all exchanged, and the price is set in dollars by the London market. Now that the Chinese banks are out of that, the BRICS nations now have a cleaner path to buy and sell oil and other commodities for local currencies, and then through the Shanghai exchange those currencies for gold. So now you have like a two-step process that Saudi Arabia is essentially selling oil for gold. Now, one of the largest holders of gold is China. So China is able to purchase oil essentially for gold using the yuan as a go-between. So this is basically the death of the dollar, all in two steps, not just one. So it's not directly, but it's there. It's there for the market. And now there's 10 countries in the BRICS nations, not just 5. They've added Egypt and Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Iran. So all 5 of those are now in there. But the Saudis are still the leader of the OPEC. And with the OPEC nations, as Saudi goes, so does the rest of the OPEC nations. So you're going to see that China is going to be able to purchase oil essentially for gold. And the Saudis will be able to sell their oil for gold. So this is the death of petrodollar in 2 easy steps. So what are your thoughts? Leave a comment down below. And I look forward to reading all of them. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.